What is your most eerie, unexplainable paranormal experience to date? It's my family, not me. My grandfather was a violent, inebriated, and wicked man who tried to kill my grandmother in front of their kids. One of his less horrible actions was abandoning my grandma and their 6 children, all of whom were less than 12. He lived around 30 or 40 miles from my grandmother and the 2 children, who had stayed in the area while he was there, and some of his children did not communicate with him. After being admitted to the hospital in the 1980s, he passed away in the middle of the night. One of my aunts, his eldest child, went to the morgue to identify the body and fill out the required paperwork. But before she got there, she stopped by my grandmother's to break the news. The odd comments weren't especially out of character, and my aunt believed that one of her siblings had already called the hospital. I guess my grandma had begun to show some signs of dementia or just old age. Oh, it's a sad day. He died just past midnight. Share the news with their mother. After brushing it off, my aunt took a car to the mortuary. She was shocked to learn that the time of death was 12:10 a.m. When she looked at the death certificate, on her way home, she stopped. When I returned to my grandmother's, I questioned her about who had called to tell her the news and why she had said she thought he had died just after midnight. In response, she said he had been to see me at 12:30 and wanted to express regret for all he had done to my grandmother. Then he resumed his jigsaw puzzle work and began to hum. I'm glad he was able to move on and make peace with me and your children. And my grandma ultimately understood her ex-husband had died around the time of his passing. Since his soul had died, in the middle of the night, I went to see her, edited, and went to bed, and when I woke up, there were a ton of comments, many of which were about similar events. I appreciate the comments. They're quite interesting, but I don't have time to reply to them all. Oh no, my grandfather was in the Alzheimer's unit, and my grandma was in a different ward. She just suffers from severe dementia. My grandfather's blood pressure dropped a few months ago, and he died the following morning before the sun came up. My grandmother seemed to have died in the middle of the night, woke up and began sobbing uncontrollably. She had no idea that his health had suddenly deteriorated. In the senior living facility where she lives, my grandma, who suffers from severe dementia, talks about seeing my grandfather. The dementia was brought on by a stroke she had. I thought it was just dementia until I felt my grandfather reclining in his recliner and smelled his breath one night when I was chatting with my girlfriend and her mother. Additionally, she hardly utilizes either limb on her left side at all due to a severe loss of mobility on that side. If someone is interested, I can discuss a lot more about the story and other stories. I allegedly called my dad after using STS and cologne, something I don't recall doing, and said things I wouldn't have said afterwards. I was shaking a lot and crying. In elementary school, my elder sister and I shared a queen-sized bed, and every night our family dog, a mutt who looked like a short-haired lassie, would sleep at the foot of the bed. I was about 6 years old when I woke up at midnight one night and noticed an odd figure at the foot of the bed. The person had no face or eyes and was all black. She moved over and fell back asleep when I attempted to wake her. The dog woke up and raised its head, so I believe my sister kicked it by accident, began growling at the individual at the foot of the bed. My sister and I are still certain that we saw a figure, even though nothing was there when my parents came in and turned on the light. My sister was awakened by the growling and started screaming when she saw the picture. We know we're not insane, because the dog spotted a ghost or other monster in our room. I'm on a mobile device, so I apologize if the formatting is odd. Since I've seen a figure like that twice in the last year or two, I can relate to your account. After going into my brother's room once, I spent the longest 5 seconds of my life looking at his mirror, which was facing my room across the hall, when I saw a dark figure standing in the hallway right next to my door. It was gone when I turned around, so I wrote it off as a figment of my imagination. I woke up in the middle of the night at approximately 2 in the morning on another occasion. My room's door started to clang shut as I reached inside to close it. I opened the door out of instinct, ready to face an intruder, but as there was nobody there, I knelt. I saw the black figure at the foot of my bed exactly as you said. I looked back to see if I could wake up my friend who was spending the night, but it was gone. I occasionally question whether I'm haunted by a spirit of some sort. I've only ever played with a Ouija board by itself, so I wonder why this started happening. In the middle of the day, while watching TV, I heard a loud noise that sounded like someone jiggling their change around in my living room. The two encounters took place in different homes, and sometimes I hear noises in other rooms, so I'm thinking I'm just a little afraid. I put my TV on hold, but the noise persisted. In my kitchen, I spotted my late husband. I began to look around the room when I saw him standing in the kitchen, looking around as if he were evaluating my position. Oh, and he was jiggling coins with one hand and holding a quarter between his fingers with the other. He accomplished a lot over his lifetime, yet I'm not sure how long we looked at one another. I was stuck, staring at him, until he turned his head. "You can see me," he said, tilting his head forward as his eyes widened. I turned my head away as I heard myself ripping up the carpet in the adjacent room once more. It's crucial to remember that my ex had only been dead for a few months when I looked back at him. Before they cross over, the dead remained for roughly 3 months. According to the Romanian ladies I dealt with, I didn't know about all of that, but I know for sure what I saw that day. Did you get divorced? Or was he your ex because he died? We had been separated for around a year when he took his own life, and we were in the middle of the divorce proceedings. As previously said, when I was younger, my brother and I were frequently tasked with watching Alex, the neighbor's child. I kept my Lego set in the window-facing section of my room, and Alex loved playing with it. One night, when I was sleeping on the couch and keeping an eye on my brother, Alex was shaking beneath your bed. He told me that he had been occupied for hours playing video games in the living room. When I asked him what was wrong, he was shivering terribly and on the verge of tears as I stepped inside to follow him into the room and attempt to bring him back out from under the bed. Alex groaned as I looked at my sliding closet and asked him what was wrong and why he was under there. He ran all the way back to his house to wait on his front steps till his parents arrived. After he strolled over to the bed to help him, he informed his parents and mine of everything that happened. While my parents were out to dinner with his, my brother and I went to see his parents to find out what had happened, because the explanation made me shudder. Alex's voice sounded like a weak vocalization of "come here," and my mother told me that he was playing with my Legos when she heard it coming from my closet. He said he looked over his shoulder and saw a small opening in the closet where my lamp was shining. He kept his gaze on the opening until he saw an eyelid open. With a little yelp, he told us that there was a man named Alex in my closet, who immediately hid under my bed, which attracted my brother's notice. My family rushed back to my house and fearfully went into my room. Finding my closet door forced open, my window left open while it had been secured, and a few previously untouchable objects toppled over. The reason is yet unknown. We recognized the power we were using to make amends after that evening, and we are grateful that nothing more serious happened. I'm not really sure what happened to my friend's sister over 15 years ago, but I'll try to explain it as Alice and her mother because your story reminded me of it. Throughout the summer, she would leave her older sister Julie at cross-country practice every morning, spend a few hours in town, and then pick Julie up. On that particular day, Julie finished early and discovered a man in her closet when she unlocked the door to her room. She crept back out to get her mother while he was searching through her things with his back to her. The man who had come to the house earlier in the week to try to sell something was chased out by Mrs. Dot with a butcher knife. No one was hurt, but I was always afraid of the narrative. My mom came over to check out the house on Monday after we had recently moved from an apartment. The porch is shaded by the plants, which would make it a perfect hiding area for someone to break in, she said. More than any ghost story, this worries me. I like a good ghost story, and when I woke up, I saw a tall, black figure standing a foot from my bed. Although I have previously worked in homes with amiable spirits, real people are much more frightening. On Saturday, the shrubs will be removed while we wait for you. It did have bright, human-like eyes, which contrasted with its black body. Though I'm not sure how long it stayed there while I was asleep, I somehow became aware that I was being watched. I opened my eyes straight up and stared at it for what seemed like an eternity. Since I felt like I was being watched, I might sound weird, but I had the impression that it was trying to gauge how I was reacting to it and wanted me to know it was there. I realized that in these other circumstances, I would have been terrified if I had suddenly seen a black, unidentified shadow. But I was too tired to care and didn't dare blink until it disappeared like smoke. I lay down again and fell back asleep immediately, as the overwhelming feeling of being watched had passed. Although it wasn't a terrifying conclusion, I will always remember that moment. For a while, my dad and stepmother had a set of baby monitors and worked opposite shifts there. For a while, they put the monitors away in the room when their shifts were scheduled. My dad used to tell my sister and me that when we were babies, we could record quick messages to each other and put them on the coffee table, so the other person could hear them when they returned home from work. Storage. After coming home from the funeral by himself, my dad spent the night organizing their possessions and storing some of her things. One of the baby monitors, he said, was on the coffee table. At a very young age, she died of cancer. My dad told me that he just stayed on the couch in the dark and listened to her message until the batteries expired a few hours later. She woke him up in the middle of the night with an old message that she had recorded playing continuously, saying, "I love you, Mike." A few weeks later, when my sister and I entered, Dad claimed to be smoking on the porch as a fierce wind blew and to be able to smell her perfume, which she always wore. I was concerned when I heard those stories as a youngster. But even though I now recognize the peace and beauty of those times, I think that some individuals just manage to say goodbye, especially if they were taken too young or were never given the chance. I wrote about how I kept hearing footsteps and knew it was my mom. I read your message, and although it seems a little unsettling, I believe it would comfort me if it were my mother. I'm saying goodbye to my little nephew. I appreciate you sharing it so late, but here's mine. I was in the military, and there were rumors that our training camp bunk was haunted. Our possessions would occasionally vanish and then reappear in odd locations, such as under our bed or inside a suitcase we had zipped up. All of this was human error, wasn't it? Then there was the night when my pal was texting his girlfriend on his phone. After the lights went out, he heard footsteps coming from the corridor when most of us were lying on our beds, falling asleep. ETC, everyone was taken aback. Was our sergeant, who quickly flipped onto his side, tucked his phone under his pillow, and acted as though he was sleeping. I still shudder when I think of what happened next. He was feigning sleep when he heard the words, "Don't worry," coming from the other side of his bed. You may continue to pretend as though you're asleep. I would dismiss this as a figment of his imagination, but I was among the 5 or 6 other people in the vicinity who heard it. What's more disturbing is that no one was there, and the voice was that of a little girl. Even stranger, when we returned from our weekend home leave, a lot of long, jet black female hair was beautifully coiled up on his bed, and beneath his pillow was a message that read, "Remember me now." Our training camp was located on an island far from the major administrative buildings. The island had been closed for Army training for the previous 15 years, so there were no citizens around, much less children to complicate matters. We never talked about it after that night, and the memory of it still chills me. As I previously stated, we were on an island in the middle of a jungle at the time. Our bunks were locked up for the weekend. There were no female recruits on the island, and the duty sergeant was not aware of the incident. Edit. Yes, people, I'm from Asia, as you Singaporeans know, until recently. Cell phones with cameras were not allowed in Singaporean army camps, so there were no pictures. For those of you who believe it could have been a hoax, that's definitely a possibility. But if it were, that would be amazing. The complexity of that prank would have been insane, and I applaud anyone who was able to pull it off. I have been through that camp and either personally experienced something or know someone who has. Many Singaporean men would tell you that the Camp Tang is a place where a lot of paranormal stuff happens, and I was very duped by that. I'm not trying to convince you, friends, but I know what happened to me. Lastly, for those of you who think I made this up, I'm just telling you what the hell happened to me in my army. I used to have a recurring dream in which a black, faceless figure would approach me and try to pose. The strangest thing is that whenever it was inside me, I would wake up feeling sick, and often I would throw up immediately. Usually, it would enter my body through my mouth and then I would have no control over my dreams, which included having a scratchy voice and telling me to do horrible things to other people. 3 years ago, you must have had control over your dream. Before that, I also experienced first-person dreams, which I've been told is odd. I thought that his vomiting was caused by sleep paralysis, but I guess that wasn't entirely true. Symptoms were similar when I lived in an old two-bedroom, 3-story walk-up in Toronto in my early 20s, when my roommate Mike caught me pacing back and pounding on the wall between our bedrooms and moving around the apartment at night, a few days after I moved in. He chastised me in the morning. Since I hadn't done anything of the sort, we simply assumed that he was dreaming or that the noises were coming from other apartments. However, this soon became a nightly occurrence, and I started to notice that sometimes in my own bedroom there was a musty, wet smell mixed with the cloying fragrance of cheap women's perfume. Think of an old person's clothes, left on a musty, damp basement floor next to a litter box that wasn't being changed often enough. And what made it even stranger was that, as you might imagine, I would get a sudden and terrible feeling of dread right before the stench started. Mike would then leave after only 4 months of our 1-year contract, leaving me to pay the rent for the entire year. Soon after he moved, I had made the decision to try sleeping in his bedroom to see if it would help until I could find another roommate. The first night I slept in his old room, I had a very detailed and realistic nightmare in which I was standing in the bathroom of the apartment, which was poorly lit, watching the broken bathroom mirror, which was only broken in my dream, and hearing loud bangs at night and the toilet flushing. The hot water in the bathtub turned on full blast several times during the night. One of the strangest things that happened just before I moved was that I was startled, awake at around 2 in the morning by the TV screaming. Poltergeist on City TV, which at the time always aired movies late at night, and when I turned on my analog TV, I had to turn a knob to change the channel or pull a knob to turn on the volume, and it turned on by itself at full blast. I discovered something while playing when I was about 16 years old. On a normal weekday, I walked downstairs to get ready for school at 6 in the morning, finding that no one else in my family had woken up. After bathing for a few minutes, someone tried to grab me because I was still sleepy and had trouble keeping my eyes open. And when I told them I was in the shower, they slammed the door open, causing the handle to go up and down. I didn't think much about it, but when I got out of the shower, I saw that no one was awake yet. So I kept eating breakfast until my dad came. When I asked him if he had wanted to use the restroom earlier, he said that it wasn't him and that my mother and younger brother were still asleep, so it couldn't have been them either. Even if it had been a family member, they wouldn't have tried to open the door so violently at 6 in the morning. He or she slashed whoever was knocking on the door harder and harder until it suddenly stopped. The only time we ever saw my mother was when she smoked at the table, and the lighter literally flew across the room and struck the wall, sticking out slightly from it. I remember sitting in my great-grandmother's living room when I was younger, and this house was known to have some issues with paranormal activity. Last year, during a break from university, I returned home with a buddy, and we decided to see a friend at his university in a different city, a small place with hills and rivers, and the room was closed with no breeze or disturbance, and my mother practically had her trousers. It was about 11 o'clock at night, and because we were still on Main Road, we decided to go to a nearby forest to smoke and drink by a river. We stood there with our car parked, and I was drinking while they were smoking and making joints. We had been standing there for about an hour without lights or people for several kilometers, when a man of about 25 or 26 came out of the tree line and said, "This place is not safe at night. You guys should go from here." And my friend, who had studied there before, started to come over after he heard me talking to someone. But he stopped suddenly, his face turning white, and he told me to get in the car because we were going. When my companion finally broke his silence and told me that the man talking to me was a boy from his university who had died in an accident on the same road 2 years earlier, I thanked him and said goodbye, and I turned the car around for 10 minutes. My companion remained silent, and when we were outside, we were so scared that we decided not to go home that night and instead spent the rest of the night getting high near a forest. The next day, my friend found a picture of the youngster and showed it to me. I think it's probable that the man just looked alike, and his mind made the leap if there was a bizarre guy in reality. But River, you were drunk, and it was dark. I thought he was an older boy camping there with his friends or something, but it was said that the boy was a loner. It was precisely the same child, and the town was in a rural location, so it was easy to distinguish a local from someone who was born and reared in the city. When I was younger, my father was looking for us after our messy divorce in Alabama, so we resided at a battered women's and children's shelter. He also frequently drove alone about the hills until the locals found him and his bike in a ditch. When I saw a hairy devil staring back at me in the mirror one night, when my custodial mom took us to Washington, I cried, panicked, and ran to get my mom, who told me it was just a normal mirror. Later that night, a nice-looking man who I can only describe as a ghost showed up, stayed at the foot of my bed all night, and left when I woke up. He came back the following night and stayed there every night for months without saying a word or moving, just keeping watch. One night, he woke me up, and I will never be the same. I can't even remember how surprised I was because I had never seen him move or talk before. I told my mother about the man, and she believed me. So I guess she decided it was better to be safe than sorry. "Come on, get out now," he yelled. So we packed up the car and went to a hotel for the night. And when we got back the following morning, we found that someone had broken in and had gone from room to room looking for someone I had never seen. Then he came back, and it was a great story. "How did you convince your mother to leave?" "I was going out late at night to hang out with some friends. When I was still living at my childhood home, when I walked through the back door of the house, I felt as though someone was watching me, and thinking I had been caught, I turned to see who had seen a completely monochromatic person with black hair that was blacker than black, a face that was like static poured over gray or white, and a dress that was halfway between the two colors, a face that had no features, just the shape of a young woman. I ran to the door, the female facing me, and just as I was closing it, it closed on me, and I fled out into the street from my yard, feeling like I was being followed. I spent the night with my friends, but I was awake soon after. We said good night and turned off the TV, stereo receiver, and DVD player, all of which have remote controls, after watching a late-night movie with my mom and my dad, who had just moved out. I was awakened by the sound of static coming from the speakers after a short time in bed, turned on the TV without any input, and met my mom in the hallway. I ultimately told my family about the first experience, and our neighbor, who was the original owner, told us a story about the family. We are both surprised to learn that a few years earlier, when I was 23 and just out of college, we were both awakened to an empty house. She adds to my account of the ghost by telling me that she and her friend used to see a young girl, who appeared to be around 12, playing in our garden while wearing a sundress. The person who originally bought the property when it was built. The girl didn't appear scary or dangerous in hindsight, and my sister still feels that way today. The family was young, and their daughter passed away from leukemia when she would have been of a suitable age. Edit: I should also add that my dog used to make me quite nervous, because he would growl with his hair on end and look crazily down the hallway to my sister's room. Since then, I haven't seen anything like it. Link the two until my fiancé was with me at my parents' house 2 Decembers ago, a short time after I had seen the ghost or whatever it was. He was helping me set up the tree and decorate the house, while my parents were out at a Christmas party. I told him it was probably just the cat, but overall, he claims he felt like someone was watching us when we were up in the attic. We went downstairs to unpack the boxes I had given him when we heard a strange sound. When my parents arrive, I go outside, and after hearing many loud thuds, my dad scolds me for being outside in the cold without a jacket. My fiancé points out that my cat is sleeping on the couch, which scares me. I thought the cat may have knocked something down. My mom and fiancé proceeded to the room where the attic access is located, after officially informing my parents that we had heard something and were afraid. A box that had been sitting far away from the steps had unexpectedly rolled down them. At my parents' place, I was getting settled and gradually dozing off with my fiancé when I heard a strange twisted voice say sweet dreams and laugh. My fiancé responded that he had heard when I sat up and grabbed him, a terrifying voice. In my ear gave me beautiful dreams, and he said, "Oh, I thought you meant that creepy laugh you just did," even though I didn't laugh, and no one else was in the room. This reminded me of a story my aunt's acquaintance told her about a woman who was practically a widow who complied with his request and, after marrying a widower, moved into the home where he lived with his ex-wife. She's restored the yard, redecorated the entire place, and overall tried to make it feel less like the ex-wife's house and more like home. The ex-wife's home is a little out of the way, so after her children go for uni and her husband departs for work, she locks the doors to prevent intruders. She gets the creeps from the place. Of course, she went for a walk one day while cleaning the house. She tried to open the restroom door upstairs, but it was locked. Before realizing that it was 9 a.m., she knocked and attempted to open it once more. When she ran, all the doors were shut and she was alone in her house. She opened the door back downstairs to find a neighbor strolling the dog in the yard. She asked her what was wrong, and the woman basically told her to contact the police because she didn't know who had locked herself in the bathroom. She was now with a bunch of people. So when the cops came back and told her that the door was locked and that no one was answering, they threatened to call a firefighter to smash it down. When they got to the bathroom, she finally gave up, and the door slid open and the lock clicked, but nobody was there, following him upstairs. The policeman attempted to open and close the door to test whether it would become stuck again, but it did not. As far as I can tell, she is still residing in the house, but she has also begun communicating with mediums around the country to find out if her ex-wife intends to murder her. I was a rookie police officer, and my brother was one of my older brothers when he committed suicide. We were quite close, but he passed away in another state. His bones were in bad shape when he was discovered, so the funeral was conducted in a closed coffin. At the time, I felt awful for not seeing the warning signs. About a week after his passing, I went back to work one evening and was running after my partner when he caught him using a pistol to beat one of his females. Before I could get away, he destroyed a narrow passageway beneath a structure that leads to a courtyard in the middle, and the pimp seized me. When I enter the courtyard, I hear my deceased brother's voice stating that everything is all right. The man leans up close to me, points his gun at my head, and pulls the trigger twice. After a brief moment of inaction, I started striking him in the head with my handgun. I don't know why I didn't just shoot him, arrest him, and take him to the street to get my partner once we unloaded the weapon. I didn't hear my partner's voice, but I told him that he squeezed the trigger. There were strike marks onto bullets. Bring the gun to the lab so it may be examined by them. The technician replaces the strike-marked bullets and discharges them into the test tank after. You explain what happened. Your brother is an angel, and there were gunshots. Like a brother, he is keeping watch over you. Love that cannot be broken, not even by death. I appreciate your nice remarks. I'm very religious, but not very spiritual. Furthermore, let me know that something will occur after our time on Earth, which will change everything.